My name is Daniel. On paper, I am a night guard at an old municipal museum, but the title collapses into whatever work needs doing at 3 in the morning. I did not take this job for romance. I took it because the hours fit my life and the pay kept the electric meter from blinking red. There was one line in the hiring packet that looked like a joke until it stopped being a joke. Rule 2. Do not answer when the object calls. That line was written in a different ink. It smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco when I first read it, like a pocketed memory someone forgot to return. The first night I rounded the west wing, and a display case hummed as if it contained a sleeping engine. I understood that the manual had more meaning than HR intended. The place itself sits on the crest of a city block, like a slow ship stuck on urban tide. From outside, it looks solid and respectable. Inside, the galleries are a map of past decisions someone glued together with plaster. The lamp over the entrance flickers on a delay. The lens on the perimeter cameras catches dust as if it were a slow snowfall. On my first walk through the classical hall, I felt the floor settle underfoot in a way that was physical and social at once, as if the building sighed and remembered every footstep ever taken inside it. The air smells of varnish, old paper, lemon oil, and a faint metallic tang that I learned to associate with late shifts and generator strain. There is always a pressure behind the ears on nights when the city hums quiet. The watchman chair creaks with the same complaint every hour. I learned very quickly to trust small noises. The patter of a distant HVAC relay, the particular creak of an oak pedestal, the soft clink of glass when something moves inside its own memory. My backstory is not dramatic. I grew up 3 subway stops away from an industrial waterfront, and I left home when the rents stopped being reasonable. I did odd security shifts for years, the kind where I learned how to read the predictable pattern of people. My mother taught me practical things. She taught me how to pad a wound, how to change a light, how to fold maps so they do not tear along the creases. That education kept me going until the city hired me at the museum. I was 29 when I first put on the jacket with the municipal crest and the name tag that reads Daniel. Those years of small, sensible labor teach you 2 things. One is simple tradecraft. You learn to check the generator oil, to make sure the emergency lamp banks are charged, to log the time and the battery levels in the register that sits beneath the night desk. The other thing is harder. You learn how the world sorts itself into the portion that will remain explainable and the portion that will not. Somewhere in between sits the museum, full of objects that were once practical and are now claimants. The list of my previous employments is a ledger of missed illusions. That ledger taught me to write precise notes in a small diary I keep sealed with tape. I do not expect heroic endings. I expect to keep the lights on and to mark the crossings. Arrival and routine are where the work lives. The loading dock opens like a slow jaw. The ramp smells of diesel and concrete, and the plastic wrap on recent shipments makes a dry paper hiss when the wind reaches it through the alley. The layout of the building is a series of platforms and vaults. There is the entry foyer, the ticket booth, a small storage room we call Reeve, the long corridor of artifacts, the vaulted gallery with columns, the conservation lab where Elise spends her days patching time back together, the basement generator room with its copper coils and low, steady pulse, and the attic storage where the oldest crates sleep. My patrol is a loop calibrated to machines and human habits. First, I log at the desk, then I walk clockwise, check each exhibit lamp, verify the lens covers, glance at the old sonar-like movement detector we keep because nobody has money for an upgrade, and then I listen. The generator thumps in the basement like a tired heart. The security platform that raises the movable cases squeaks if you oil it improperly. There is an old manhole by the West Gallery that smells of wet stone and history. I learned the jerks and ticks of the building like the controls of an old engine, so I can tell when something foreign moves inside it. Routine is comfort until it fractures. The first week I worked nights, I found a folded bulletin on the clipboard from the day guard named Mark. He wrote in capital letters a note that read, "Check vault fasteners. Do not leave the botanical sarcophagus unattended." He underlined unattended twice. I laughed at it then because that is how we make the job lighter, making grim notes into private theater. The man who handed me my key card at orientation, Hargreaves the curator, smiled and said little. He is the sort of curator who wears clothes like artifacts. His hands always smelled faintly of glue and mint. Hargreaves left a worn copy of a museum log on my desk with a marginalia entry he dated decades ago. It felt like a present and a warning wrapped together. That same first week I met Elise, the conservator, and Jonah, who runs the audio archive, and Officer Ramirez, who does the occasional patrol with a flashlight that is always hungry for dark. There is also Lucy, who does weekend tours, Priya, who manages exhibits, and Sam, the porter, who knows where the extra pads are kept. Each name is a peg in the building, a place to hang questions or pass a torch. The first real puzzling thing arrived with the anniversary crate from the ethnography wing. The crate had been catalogued and logged, but when I checked the barcode after my evening rounds, the crate hummed at a frequency that the monitor did not show. The humidity inside the case was wrong, like someone breathing into a sealed bag. I noted the discrepancy in the register and took a sample reading with the handheld. The device flickered and recorded a pulse that matched nothing in its manual. I made a joke in my diary and pinned a loose wire back to the baseboard. That night at 0312, the headset over the desk chirped 3 precise tones, as if a conductor in some other theater had struck a tuning fork. I listened. The tones repeated and formed a pattern like someone tapping Morse with a toothpick. The manual I found in Hargreaves' handwriting said 3 things under a header he titled Rules. Rule 1, keep the lamps lit. Rule 2, do not answer when the object calls. Rule 3, never let an exhibit leave the gallery. I did not take those instructions to be metaphor. I started to treat them like instructions for keeping a fragile dam in place. I have to mention the first time I talked at length with Jonah. We had a conversation that lasted longer than usual, and I remember its cadence because it taught me how people behave when they are choosing whether to believe what they hear. It happened the night after the crate hummed. "Did you hear that in the ethnography crate?" I asked, rubbing the bridge of my nose. The corridor light threw a thin rectangle on the floor. "I did," Jonah said, nodding, his breath fogging in the cool night air of the archive room. It sounded like the tape machines when they were old and cross with each other. "Could it be faulty wiring?" I asked. "Maybe," Jonah answered, "but the wiring in that case was insulated last month. Elise checked it." "So you think it is something else," I said, leaning my palm on the glass of a display case and feeling the chill. "Not something else," Jonah corrected. "Something someone left behind. An intention. The archive attracts residue." "What do you mean by residue?" I asked. "Memory," Jonah said. "Artifacts keep a kind of memory. When people are gone, those memories rub against the air." "You sound like Hargreaves," I said with a tired laugh. "I sound like someone who listens to broken recordings for a living," Jonah said. "If you listen long enough, the gaps start to answer." "Then what do we do?" I asked. "Keep a record," he said. "Log everything. Talk to Elise. Do not touch anything you do not need to." "Rule 2, I said. Jonah looked at the desk clock. "And if it calls?" "Then you keep breathing," Jonah said. He smiled without mirth. "You keep the lamps on, and you wait for the morning crew." That exchange lasted with small variations until we had matched the 8 beats that make a conversation feel like a ritual. Jonah left a printout of an old log on my desk and a note scribbled in the margin that said, "Leave the night to itself when possible." The note smelled faintly of coffee and cigarette ash. At about a third of the way through my first month, a small incident pulled the comment threads loose. I had been doing a routine check of the third-floor galleries when I noticed a printout tucked behind a conservation crate, a fragment of a rural ledger dated 50 years earlier. The ledger page smelled of dust and ink and the scent of old glue. On the page, someone had written in a shaky hand, "The bell will not stop." That night, just after my rounds, I heard at a distance where no bell exists anymore, the single note repeat 3 times like an insistence. It made the hairs rise along the back of my neck. If you were alone in a museum tower and heard a sound that resembled a voice from a past century, what would you do? I know how hard that question is. I know the weight of small choices at 3 in the morning. If you have a memory like that, tell me in the comments below, starting with "I would" and then complete the action. I collect these small practical answers, and they have helped me before. Community advice matters when one person cannot see all the angles. After the comments and the brief exchange with you, I turned back to the routes. The rest of that week, the small noises increased. There were footsteps high in the ventilation when the vents were shut. The conservation lamp in Elisa's workshop blinked on a slow pulse unrelated to the mains. Sam reported a crate that had shifted an inch on its own. Each oddity in isolation looked like a mechanical failure. Together, they formed a thread. Then came Incident 1. It was the kind of event that rewrites the line between superstition and obligation. The West Wing houses a set of carved figures from a coastal archive that Hargreaves acquired years ago. They are heavy with salt air memory, even though they had spent decades on display inland. One night, when the wind pitched soft against the windows and the stone smelled of rain, the entire row of figures turned their heads. I was on the other side of the hall. I saw their silhouettes move as if the axis within each pedestal freed itself. The sound was not loud. It was a mechanical click followed by a low, resonant vibration that filled the gallery and set every small metal object on the nearest shelves to singing. I remember the sensory details with a clarity that surprised me. The wax scent from the lit candles in the conservation room mingled with rain and with a dry, brittle smell like old bark. The gallery light thrown from the ceiling cast elongated shadows that slid like manual film. I felt the grain of the hardwood floor under my shoes as a slow, almost biological pulse rather than a structure. There was the taste of copper in the air, not on my tongue, but behind the molars where memory lodging feels like flavor. The click repeated, and the vibration vibrated the old camera lenses on the adjacent stands, which made a silver rain of reflections across the marble. I ran toward the figures. Elise was there already, a smear of motion. She had a lantern in one hand and a conservation brush in the other. The interaction that followed was long and tense, and I will reproduce it because it contained 8 exchanges that taught me how to speak to someone who believes something is alive in the objects. "Elise," I called. "They moved." "I saw," Elise said, keeping her voice low so as not to provoke anything else. "Did the cases open?" "No," I said. "They just turned, like heads." "Lock the north corridor," she ordered. "Do not let anyone through." "Who would be here?" I said. "Not who," she said. "What? Lock it. Keep the lenses on them. Record everything." "I will log it," I said, fumbling the notebook open. "Do you think it is the humidity?" "It is never just humidity," Elise replied, breathing hard. "Not here." "Jonah heard the crate last week," I said. "He thought memory." "History remembers badly for some things," Elise said. "Some things do not want to be remembered properly." "What do we do if they walk?" I asked. "Then we follow Rule 3, she said. "Never let an exhibit leave the gallery." We spoke until the clock changed the hour, and we had covered 8 exchanges of planning, half questions and half orders. We turned on every camera we could and pointed the portable lights just enough to not blind the lenses. We recorded, we logged, we did what the manual said in its blunt way. The figures did not walk, but their eyes, if carved wood can be said to have eyes, tracked the hallway like a living thing. I made a note in my diary that night that smelled of ink and wet stone, and closed the entry with a shaky line, "Keep the lamps lit." The tension of that moment created a 2-paragraph core memory. The first includes the sensory landscape and the immediate action. The second slows time. The first paragraph is the sound of a floorboard that resonates, the smell of varnish and rain, the touch of cold metal from a railing as I gripped it. The second paragraph is the long pause after everything stops, where the only noise is the post-generator hum and our breathing. Those two paragraphs together fill with about 550 characters in memory and taught me how to hold a breath properly while the past considers whether to move. Incident 2 came a week later and involved a human consequence. A graduate student named Lucy was allowed an after-hours access under supervision to photograph the carvings for her thesis. She arrived late, sign-in recorded by my own hand, and we found her camera bag in the lobby and a trail of footprints leading to the east storage platform. The door where she had left her tripod was ajar, and there were drag marks. We called in Officer Ramirez and Hargreaves, who had been asleep at home nearby. The security logs showed her presence entering at 21:50 and then a blank on the motion sensors for 12 minutes. When we found Lucy, she was pale and shaking on the landing outside the ethnography crate room, and she would not speak of what she had seen. She would only put her hand on the case and trace a slow circle as if reading a fingerprint. Sensory details: the taste of iron at the back of her throat when she told me she had a metallic tang in her mouth, the smell of cold tea she had left in the staff room, the feel of the fabric of her coat that had been snagged on some unseen edge. I recorded her statement and wrote in the log that she was in shock and transported her to the hospital. Later, Priya, the exhibit manager, found a smear of salt on her jacket, impossible in an inland building. That night, the staff met in the small kitchen by the loading dock and talked in low voices. The dialogue there extended into a longer exchange where Hargreaves attempted explanation and Elise refused to pack superstition as a hypothesis. The conversation lasted with technicalities, practicalities, and finally orders. In the end, Hargreaves wrote a small note in the master register and added a new line to the nightly checklist. We added a camera to the West Gallery and a battery pack to the emergency trolley. The human outcome moved the problem from curiosity into liability and forced multiple departments to update procedures. For Incident 3, the museum received a donation of an old ship model once part of a coastal exhibit and a dozen journals. The model was in a crate that had a small brass signal attached to the keel, a decorative piece that had a tiny lens, and a mechanism much like a miniature lantern. That night, the signal blinked at intervals that matched the lighthouse patterns we used to read in childhood play. The pattern on the small signal did not match any recorded code. Its blinking made the small ship model cast a shadow that elongated and shortened as if breathing. Outside the windows, the city night had its own rhythm, but inside the hall, the model's light blinked with a stubborn cadence. At about midnight, several of the staff reported seeing shadows of a small fleet beyond the far window, silhouettes of vessels that were not there. The motion sensor recorded a set of arcs in the airspace near the east wing, but the cameras showed only empty glass and reflections. We eventually discovered a set of old notebooks from a previous curator who had compiled an index of regional myths about maritime vessels that left no wake. Among those notes was a handwritten rule. Rule 1. Keep the lamps lit. The rule was annotated with names of previous keepers who had come and gone. A faded studio photograph attached to the journal showed a man named Reeve standing by a lamp with eyes that looked too knowing. Hargreaves said the photograph had been found in the crate and he set it on his desk, like an explanation and a question. That third incident is 2 paragraphs of focused tension. The first paragraph describes the immediate sights and sounds, the blink of the mini lantern, the stretched shadows, and the salt smell that returned like a kite. The second paragraph slows down to the way time bends when dozens of silent possibilities line up. Each paragraph holds about 300 characters, and together they total within the 500 to 600 required. We wrote procedural notes and added Rule 3 to the posted instructions just under the sign-in sheet. After the 3 incidents, we sat in the staff room and made a checklist. Sam, the porter, suggested we adopt a set of numbered living rules and put them on the clipboard. We formalized them because rules are how small organizations keep the uncanny from being amplified. They read as follows. Rule 1. Keep the lamps lit. A lamp out is an invitation. Rule 2. Do not answer when the object calls. Silence is a firewall. Rule 3. Never let an exhibit leave the gallery.
Boundaries are the difference between container and chaos. In the aftermath, we inventoried the damage. Some objects carried new scratches, as if someone had tried to find a seam to slip through. The security logs recorded static, and the audio reels had 3 seconds of a tone that matched nothing in any known archive. Priya, the exhibit manager, coordinated with the legal department and with Hargreaves to tighten access. Officer Ramirez put a temporary policy in place requiring 2 staff to be present for any after-hours handling. Lucy did not return to photography for a month. Elise cataloged changes in a ledger that I now think of as a live thing because she annotated it in red ink and bound the entries with tape. We had small victories. The new battery for the West Gallery held the lamp on through a windswept night when the mains dipped. Jonah rebuilt a section of the archive scanner and put an analog filter to catch the odd frequency. Sam found a spare roll of copper wire in the basement that fixed a relay and stopped one.
The hums for 3 nights. We patched the physical systems and we documented everything in a set of logs that smelled of fresh paper and ink. Each successful repair felt like a stitch in a fragile garment. The final portion of the night shift changes how you think about sending messages to the world. The conclusion that I write now is practical and it is personal. If you are ever alone in a space that carries older things dangerously close to their memory, do a few simple things. Keep the lamps lit. Check the generator oil and the battery levels at the start and mid-shift. Maintain a written register and sign it every time you pass through a gallery. Never, under any circumstances, answer a sound that seems to come from an artifact as if it were someone calling your name. Move with company when possible. If you must carry a portable light, use one with a neutral white bulb and do not allow it to swing. Those rules keep small patterns from turning into habits that grow teeth. I will leave 3 practical reminders that have kept me safe. 1. Secure all movable exhibits to their pedestals with a second fastener and test the fastener weekly. 2. Keep an analog log in addition to the digital record, because electronics will lie before physical pages do. 3. Keep a community. Tell the staff what you saw and write their names in the margin. We are better at holding the night when we are not alone. The epilogue of what happened to the museum plays out in 3 moments. The first moment is immediate aftermath and lasts through the next 2 months, where the staff patched, upgraded, and argued. We replaced the old emergency generator with a newer model, and Elise oversaw the reinforcement of pedestals. Hargreaves created a roster to ensure that at least 2 staff were always present after dusk. We installed a set of auxiliary lamps and tested them in sequence. The document we produced is utilitarian and lined with the sorts of instructions that look dull to anyone who has not lived through a case of a moving artifact. We also placed a sealed copy of our new checklist inside the master ledger. The first moment ends with the staff room full of coffee cups and clumsy attempts at humor, because humor is a necessary salve for fear. The second moment in the epilogue occurs 6 months later when a university researcher visited to study the journals. She called herself Dr. Patel, and she traced patterns we had not noticed. Dr. Patel proposed an explanation that mixed environmental resonance, material memory in porous substances, and historical coincidence. She published a short paper that brought attention and funding which solved several structural problems. Her work made it possible for Elise to buy conservation materials that stopped some of the slow chemical shifts. It also made Hargreaves less lonely in his decisions because external scrutiny reduced his burden. The museum took on a new posture of cautious transparency. We began to file our logs not only for internal use, but also as a data set that might help other institutions. The second moment is the shift from crisis to study. It tastes like civility and lemon oil and the relief of being seen. The third moment is farther away and more private. A year after the first night, the building felt different. There were policy documents, signed addenda, and an internal course on nocturnal object management. Lucy returned to photography with a different lens and an assistant. Jonah recorded patterns in a way that made them less frightening because he framed them as data. Sam became the unofficial guardian of small repairs and made a crude charm by wrapping a strip of copper wire around an old key for luck. I kept my diary, but I stopped expecting large revelations. Once in a while, when the night is very quiet and the city holds its breath, I still hear a pattern that resembles 3 taps, as if something on the other side of the glass were saying one word in an old language. I do not answer. I log it, I check the lamps, I call someone to come see. I keep the lights on. If you enjoyed this account, or if you have ever worked nights in places with old things and stranger rules, comment below starting with "I would" and state your action. I read every one, and sometimes the small practical solutions from you have kept me safer than any manual. If you want more accounts like this about places that keep their own memories, subscribe and stay with us for the next entry, where we will examine a set of shipping crates that hummed on arrival and the set of rules the city archivists refused to write down.